Okay, so let's go through these problems. So we have that L represents the number of large dump trucks, S the number of small dump trucks, T sub L is the number of tons of material that a single dump truck can carry, T sub S number of tons of material that a single small dump truck can carry. We don't know whether L and S are equal to each other. We have no reason to assume that they are. Okay, so the expression that represents the total number of dump trucks that can be carried is just going to be the sum of these two, or L plus S. The total number of tons that all the company's large trucks can carry means that we have to take the number of large trucks and multiply it by the amount that each large truck can carry. And then we need to do something similar for the small dump trucks, and so we would have S times T sub S. The total number of tons that all the company's dump trucks can carry, we have to combine the statements, the expressions from B and C. So we have L times T sub L plus S times T sub S, and that gives us the total tonnage for the company's fleet. Okay, now we need to figure out the average number of tons the company's trucks can carry. So we need the total tonnage divided by the number of trucks. And again, we can't just do T sub L plus T sub S divided by 2, because that only represents the average of 2 trucks. But if, for example, the fleet had 50 large trucks and only 10 small trucks, then that average that we just calculated by dividing by 2 would be inaccurate. So what we need is to figure out the total tonnage, which is L times T sub L plus S times T sub S, divided by the number of trucks, which is L plus S. So that gives us our average tonnage for the trucks in the fleet. Okay, in our next problem, we have the rental company that rents out buses for groups. Buses hold a maximum of 80 people. You'll rent to any group that has 20 more people, Okay. In these kind of problems, I think it often helps to start with a table. So we say, let N represent the number of people, and this would represent the cost per person. So we know that at 20 people, it's going to cost us 80 per. 21, it's going to go down to 79. 22, it's going to go down to 78. 23, it'll go to 77. And we know this goes all the way down until we get to the number of 80, which is the maximum the bus can hold. And now we know, since we've gone up 57 to get from 23 to 80, we'll have to go down 57 to get from 77 to 20. Because we're going down $1 per person for each increase of 1 in the value of N. So one of the things you'll notice is that 20 plus 80 is equal to 100, 21 plus 79 is equal to 100, 22 plus 78 equal to 100. So what we can say more generally is that if we call this number N, then this has to be equal to 100 minus N. So now the expression for the total amount that we would charge, that the people would charge if there are N passengers, is N, the number of passengers, multiplied by 100 minus N, which is the price per passenger. Or if we distribute, we're going to get 100N minus N squared. And we also know that N has to be less than or equal to 80, greater than or equal to 20. So that's really the simplest form for this. And again, sometimes when you're dealing with something like this that can be a little confusing, a table, representing things in a table can help make it more concrete. Okay, so let's continue on to our next problem here. And we have the 200 feet of wire fencing, and we know that we are building this up against a barn. So here's our barn, and we need wire fencing for 3 sides. And so this is what our pen will look like. And we have fencing here, we have it over here, and we have it over here. And we're saying that these 2 sides here are going to be labeled as X. So let's call that x and x. So what we also know is that if, let's say we call this y here, we can say that y has to be equal to 200 minus x, because we started with 200, and we had to subtract the x for the two sides here and here. So that can become y is equal to 200 minus 2x. So now we have an expression for the length of the pen, and now we have, well, we have our two dimensions as x, and 200 minus 2x. Okay, so now we can say if we now have the both things labeled, so we have the width of our fence. And now let's go on again. So we have the width, we said was 200 minus 2x. Okay, so now to get an expression for the area of the pen, well, we need to multiply the length times the width, which will give us x times 200 minus 2x, which is going to give us 200x minus 2x squared. So that represents the area of our pen. The maximum, well, we could try different things. So for one thing, we know that x has to be less than 100, greater than 0. So let's try a couple values for x. So if x is 25, then we have 200 minus 2x, and we have our area here. So let's pick a couple values. Let's say we'll pick 25 for x. 200 minus 2x would give us 200 minus 50, or 150, and that would give us an area of 3750 units squared. If x was 50, that's going to give us this 100, and that means our area is going to be 5,000. And at 75, we would get this would be equal to 50, and this is again going to give us 3750. So certainly 50 is greater value than 25 or 75. Well, let's try 40, which would give us 200 minus 2x would be 120. That would give us an area of 4,800. 60 would give us an area, it would be 200 minus 2 times 60 would give us 80, which would also give us an area of 4,800. So it looks like we're kind of zeroing in on the middle value here between 40 and 60 as our maximum value. And you can confirm that if you just try, let's say, 51 and 49, you'll see that you get values that are slightly less. So 50 is going to give us our maximum value. Okay, last problem. We have an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. It can be turned into a cylinder, either the long way or the short way. All right, let's see what we're going to get with this. So we have our paper here, and it's 11 by 8.5. And so the cylinder is either going to have a circumference of 8.5, which would be equal to 2 pi r, which would mean that 8.5 over 2 pi would be equal to r. Alternatively, and that would also give us then the height of that cylinder would be equal to 11. Alternatively, we would get that the circumference is equal to 11, which would be equal to 2 pi r, which means that 11 over 2 pi would be equal to r, and our height would be equal to 8.5. Okay, so what we're going to get when we plug into our volume, pi r squared h, we're going to get pi, and first we'll do this one. We're going to get times 8.5 over 2 pi squared times 11. Or for the second one, we're going to get pi times 8.5, I'm sorry, times, let me erase that, times 11 over 2 pi is our radius, and that's squared times 8.5. Well, we can see pretty clearly we have a pi in both. We divide by 2 pi squared in both. But here we multiply by 8.5 times 8.5 times 11. Here we multiply 11 times 11 times 8.5. So clearly this one is going to give us our greater volume. And in fact, if we then took this piece of paper and we split it in half like this, and took this piece here and attached it to the end here so that we had a new thing that looked like this, which was 17 by 4.25, that would give us either, that would change the volume again. And so we could think about which of these would give us our greatest possible volume if we keep cutting this piece of paper into strips. Is there any limit to how large we could make the volume of this thing? And that's just something to think about. Okay, in general, if a rectangular paper has length L, area A, what volume of a cylinder formed by the paper if the cylinder's height is equal to h? Okay, so let's think about this. So we have our piece of paper, and the length here is L, the area is A, and so that means the width here is equal to A divided by L. Okay, so let's think about what the volume of this thing would be. So if we're saying that this is going to be equal to our circumference, it's going to be equal to 2 pi r. That means that the radius is going to be equal to, we'll divide by 2 pi, we're going to get A over L divided by 2 pi, which is the same as saying A over 2 pi L, which means that the volume of this thing is going to be equal to L. We're going to have pi times height times r squared, so pi times L times A over 2 pi L squared, which would be equal to pi times L times A squared over 4 pi squared L squared, which when simplified will have a pi and it'll cross out one of these pi's here. We'll have an L and one of these L's will cross out, so we're going to end up with just A squared over 4 pi L. Okay. Excuse me here.